My name is Rashid Dambuya. I am a human rights lawyer based in Sierra Leone, and I'm also the coordinator for the working group on IDPs in Sierra Leone, and the executive director for an organization called Legal Link. And Legal Link is basically an organization that seeks to defend the rights of vulnerable groups in Sierra Leone, of course, to which IDPs are not an exception. So generally about IDPs and legal frameworks, especially within the African continent, I must confess that we're still lagging behind as a continent, notwithstanding the fact that we have already a convention, an AU convention that protects the rights of IDPs in the continent. But many African countries are yet to domesticate that framework, even though they've signed. And Sierra Leone is one country, and we have made some progress in terms of having institutional frameworks, but yet we are lagging behind in terms of domestication. And this is the case for many African countries, say a few like Kenya, that have done well in terms of domesticating the convention. And when we don't have laws, policies, and institutional frameworks in place, then it becomes very difficult to protect and assist IDPs, across the continent. Why is law so important? Because it's the first step. In the absence of a law, we cannot hold our government accountable. They will just be relying on policies and also treat IDPs as charitable objects. And when they fail to secure assistance or protect their rights, we cannot enforce against the state because we don't have a framework that we can rely on to compel compliance. That is why it's important for governments to not only sign to the AU Convention on the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons that was passed in 2009, but they have to also take steps at the national level to have existing framework to domesticate the convention so that they can hold themselves to account, and it becomes a right-based approach in dealing with IDPs going forward. So Sierra Leone is making some steps in terms of recently we have developed an action plan at the very least to provide a roadmap, a direction, and a focus so that the government will, going forward, be able to understand how progressively they can realize the rights of IDPs in the country. The National Action Plan has now been submitted to the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone, and they have agreed to serve as lead agency in providing advocacy, lobbying for acceptance and implementation of the National Action Plan. But then how did we get to the National Action Plan? It was a long process, so we had to organize a 2-day stakeholders conference and invited all stakeholders. So it's important for national action plans to incorporate several actors so that at the end of the day, there will be a buy-in by state and non-state actors. So in that 2-day summit, we invited the MDAs, Ministry Department agencies, we invited civil society, we invited the community, we also invited the just community, the local authorities, and then the IDPs themselves were there. So we cannot make policies and action plans for them if they are not a part of it. So they were also on the table, they gave their input as to what the action plan should entail regarding their rights and their needs. So after the 2-day program, we were able to have a draft, which was validated by all the stakeholders at the time of the conference, and we even involved the Human Rights Commission because we saw the whole engagement as a human rights issue. IDP protection assistance is relatively a human rights issue, and the Human Rights Commission made an undertaking that they are pleased to be a part of this process, and they will take the lead to advocate and lobby for support for IDPs. So we brought also people who have been affected in Sierra Leone. We've had several instances that led to internal displacement. For example, we had the Ebola crisis, we had the coronavirus now, and of course we also had landslide. The whole community was wiped. Over 500,000 people were displaced, and over 1,000 people were killed when there was a landslide in our community. And so recently, in fact, there was an inferno that led to 1,000 people being displaced. the government lacked a national action plan, and so the response were largely on a charitable basis. And so this action plan we have now drafted is welcoming, and it has provided a roadmap on how to deal with these issues on a progressive realization basis. And the IDPs themselves are now better placed to claim their rights, because there is now a document to which they can reference when they call for much more support from the government. So it's important for states across the continent to understand that action plans are good, and they can help to incentivize the change that is required for IDP protection and assistance. The UN Guiding Principle on Internal Displacement is calling for states to develop action plans, as well as the AU Convention. So it's important that governments across the world take steps and develop action plans, policies, and eventually have laws that will hold themselves to account when they fail to adequately protect and assist internally displaced persons within their jurisdiction. And another thing that is important to also know in this discourse is the fact that sustainability and durable solutions are very key in driving the required changes that we need in terms of protecting and assisting IDPs. What do I mean by this? So what we did in Sierra Leone, after we developed the action plan, we did not only stop there. We went further to form a working group. So governments should also ensure that working groups exist, and this is particularly a call for CSOs. So when we finished having the plan, we formed a working group, a GENIDA working group on IDPs in Sierra Leone, and that working group is currently tasked with the responsibility of advocating and pushing for implementation of the action plan. So it's a civil society-led initiative. So when the government now fails in terms of following the action plan and the activities thereon, there is a body that will call them to attention. And that's how we get to durable and sustainable solutions. If we don't have a body that monitors and calls for speedy implementation of the action plan, then it will be another document that just sitting down there and no action will be taken on it. So the working group is currently engaging in advocating and pushing for implementation of the action plan. So that's a durable way of holding to account our governments when they fail to take steps in line with the action plans they've endorsed regarding IDP protection and assistance. So it's important for African states to also understand how to do these things. So durable solutions could also mean engaging networks, having in place working groups that will continue the advocacy, the training, and also the engagement of IDPs. And we've also pledged as a working group to be holding sessional meetings with IDPs themselves to train them on the frameworks and how to claim their rights. Because if they don't know their rights, they cannot easily claim them. So how they can get to that is by engaging them with training, advocacy, and also education, and making them own the process in terms of calling for more support regarding their situations. And then we are planning also down the line to push for policy and then, of course, eventually a law on IDP protection. But gradually, on a case-by-case basis and in a progressive way, we are making progress as a nation. So this is the call that we may want to extend to other countries that are lagging behind. Remember, the AU has opened us up to having a whole convention on IDP protection. It is now the responsibility and duty, I would say, of states to take further step in ensuring that frameworks exist, at the very least, a national action plan, to start the discussion on how we can get to durable solutions in terms of protecting and assisting IDPs in the continent. So as a human rights advocate, this is my call. It's time for states to look at this issue from a human rights-based approach. The approach has been largely charitable. These people are human beings. IDPs are human beings. They deserve dignity and respect in the way we treat their issues. And it's enough a time for us to stop seeing them as charitable objects, where when the incidents occur, we just go and visit them once in a while, carry food, mattress, and you name it, and then just disappear, and don't even think about them anymore. So the one-stop approach is something we must resist. There must be durable solutions. They must be treated as human beings. Their right to health, their right to life, their right to affordable housing is key, and we must ensure that when these situations occur that forces them to be displaced internally, we find durable solutions and ensure that they are treated as human beings and their rights are respected, going forward.